So what is that, Bill?
That is the Paddy Ashdown Social and Liberal Democrats mug. I think it's from the 1992 election.
We're gonna have to send you a Hiraeth mug, I think, Bill.
Oh, I would love one. It would have pride of place.
Welcome to Hiraeth, the home of modern Welsh politics.
The UK general election campaigns are barrelling towards their conclusion, and due to new constituencies, a record level of retirements, and the likelihood of a change of the political direction of the UK, we are expecting many new faces elected to the House of Commons for Wales. We're taking the opportunity to speak to some of these new candidates about their campaigns, their policies, and their parties. Monmouthshire has a new dimension following the boundary review, as it is now more or less reflects the Monmouthshire local authority, swapping some territory with Torfaen and Newport East in the process. The predecessor seat of Monmouth was as solid as a Conservative seat could be in Wales, having held it for 93 of the 106 years since it was created. This year, one of the candidates seeking to oust sitting MP and Secretary of State for Wales, David T.C. Davies, is a familiar figure for Senedd watchers. Ex-Lib Dem Party President for Wales, Councillor William Powell, joins us today. Good morning, Bill.
Orada.
Orada, I should say, yes. You know, you are recognisable in Welsh politics, I think it's fair to say. For our listeners who might not know much about you, could you just tell us a little bit about who you are, why you're standing for election this time, and if I can, or why have you been selected for Monmouthshire?
Well, I'm William Powell, as you say. By heritage, I am a farmer, and the latest in a very long line of farming folk in here in the Black Mountains, which is a shared asset between Monmouthshire and Powys, Breconshire specifically. By profession, I'm a teacher of modern languages, and I've taught in schools in Herefordshire, in Gloucestershire, and also briefly in Powys. And by happenstance, I suppose you could say I'm a politician. I was elected against my expectations as county councillor for my hometown in 2004. And I think there've been four successive occasions afterwards when I've been fortunate enough to be re-elected. On one or two occasions earlier, the ignominy of being returned unopposed, which I think is becoming increasingly vilified in certain circles, and I understand why. But at the same time, you can't organize your own opposition. You can just mobilize your own campaign. I am in politics for a number of reasons, but I was particularly motivated even during my teaching career when I was less able to be politically active, by themes around our membership and engagement and commitment to the European Union and what it brings to our country and what we have brought and will in the future again bring to it, as well as a commitment to fairness and to electoral reform, which I think is more urgent than ever in the likelihood of the general election result that we may face, but also one that needs to be refined considerably from the current proposals in our Senedd for the closed list system that has been proposed, which I am particularly unhappy about.
I think we could get you back on that at some point, because I'm also particularly unhappy with that particular system.
Particularly combined with the thresholds, which I think are destined, possibly designed, to limit the diversity of voices and the diversity of parties in the future Senedd. And I think that's a particularly difficult situation for those of us who believe in the Senedd and in its growth and in its flourishing in the future. But that's, as you say, a subject for another time, I suspect.
It is. We do welcome your views on that. But as I mentioned in the introduction, Monmouthshire is having some tweaks and changes in its boundaries, as many areas of Wales are. How does that new map affect your campaign, and does it change your expectations?
Well, I think that those with a reasonably long memory will recall times when the Liberal Democrats have challenged at different times in both of the Newport seats, and clearly in the Newport East constituency which has been strongly represented by Jess Morden in recent years, there is actually quite a strong Liberal tradition, and I encountered some individuals with strong commitment in our direction when I was in Mago and Undy just last week, doing some engagement work, and then before heading across to Chepstow, which was one of the previous southernmost points in the historic seat. And incidentally, I'm heading across to Chepstow later today for the final hustings of the campaign.
Just a quick sidebar question: How are those hustings going? Is Monmouthshire a seat where they embrace the hustings approach?
I must say that's one of the most refreshing and positive dimensions of the Monmouthshire campaign this time. We've had so far 4 hustings out of 5, and possibly by the time the podcast goes out, they'll all be concluded. And they've ranged from 150 plus in Monmouth Baptist Church on an early Sunday about 2.5 weeks ago, 120 plus in Monmouthshire Comprehensive School, jointly with the Monmouthshire Independent Haberdasher Schools. Very lively, excellently organised. Then we moved on to the NFU, FUW, YFC at Raglan earlier this week. Must have been 60, 70 people there. Very diverse range of people again. And at St Mary's Priory Church, Abergavenny, where there was I would say there must have been in excess of 150 people 2 nights ago. This evening we're in St Mary's Chepstow. So and really good, engaged debate, robust discussion. But one thing I must say is that there's always been a decent level of respect across the platform. And that's something that I think isn't always present in these hustings. But also, it's fair to say that hustings as a tradition have fallen away, I think, in some of our national politics. And I very much regret that. And I think there's civil society appears and is alive and well in Monmouthshire. And I welcome that very much.
It is to be welcome, because one of the things certainly in urban Cardiff, I don't think there's been any hustings in my constituency, which Cardiff South and Penarth, but I don't think there's been that many in some of the others. So it sounds like it is very robust in Monmouthshire. It is good to see.
Be not far shy of 1,000 people, I think, will have attended the hustings when you aggregate them all together. You know, and that is really. And also, I've been contacted by a school that was by pupils, students at a school, in fact, just outside the constituency, but which draws on the hinterland of Chepstow, at Wydene School, and they had a mock elections. I had engagement. I was reached out to by students who are standing for the Liberal Democrats, and engaged with them, sent them some materials, and have had some good contact there. So that's a really encouraging dimension.
Cross-border politics. We can bring the Forest of Dean into the Senedd in future, maybe. But
the lost lands.
they are. But you're standing in a seat that is home to the Secretary of State for Wales. You are looking to oust him as the representative. How do you rate his performance as the local MP over recent years?
David Davis and I disagree profoundly on many areas of policy, and he is, I think, a traditional right winger, and somebody who's always been Eurosceptic and has taken a fairly hardline approach on a range of issues, including matters of sanctuary and a range of other issues around housing policy and so on. But I think even his strongest opponent would struggle to not to concede that he's been a hard worker. He's got a strong reputation for local action. It might not always be the action I would seek, but and I think the thing that if I was asked as to something that I admire about him, it would be the fact that he, unlike myself, has as a non-Welsh speaker, has learnt the language, and is not a natural linguist necessarily, but he's learnt the language. He now does interviews in fluent Welsh, and he engages across the Welsh media. you have to show some respect where it's due, and I think that would be my one area where I think David T.C. Davis certainly does deserve some credit.
Yeah, no, I don't think a lot of people knew that his Welsh is learnt in that respect, and it is great credit to him. But I think it's nice that you recognise that quality as well. So you've done these hustings. I'm sure you've knocked on the doors as well. What are the messages coming back to you from constituents in Monmouthshire?
Well, the messages coming back aren't always ones that are consistent with the textbook about what's devolved and what's not. You can probably anticipate that the conversations that I've had on the doorstep, in cafes, a couple on the bus, in pubs, health is the number one issue, and clearly that is devolved, and the management of that and so on sits with the Senedd. But particular issues in Monmouthshire around the struggles that the Grange Hospital has encountered and continues to have, particularly around A&E and other capacity issues. That links clearly to funding and management, but in terms of the quantum of funding that the Welsh NHS has, we believe and we would seek to deliver a stronger package for the Welsh NHS that needs to be passported onto the front line. But it's a complicated one. And another dimension, of course, is in parts of Monmouthshire is the cross-border dependencies on health delivered in the Wye Valley Trust in Hereford and Gloucester in some cases, depending on the specialism. But that's been the number one issue, strongly followed up by issues around our environment and the health of our rivers and the manifesto for the Wye, which I endorse and support. And issues around cleanliness of the water and the outrage at the level of sewage and pollutants that find their way into the Wye. That's a very big issue too. And I suppose the third one would be that sense of alienation that you meet when people say, well, you know, you lot are all the same, and there's issues of trust that come up, and obviously you have waves of issues. Most recently, it's been around the betting gate, and then previously issues around donations of dubious origin in different parties, and so on and so forth. And these are key issues. So the issue of trust is a big one.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Certainly, the environment and water quality has come up in these pods before, and health to an element. But as you mentioned, it is devolved, so it's a difficult one, I imagine, to handle on the doorstep. But you know, you've mentioned those what are coming back to you from the doors. What are you focusing on from your party's policies? What is your central kind of message going out in this campaign?
Well, one of the key messages for us links to health, and it's our commitments to boosting the resourcing and the respect around social care, and that relates both to delivered social care, but also critically to rewarding and respecting informal carers, carers within family or community networks, and also the critical work delivered by young carers, and that's been really captured by somebody who I think has been a bit of a surprise in this campaign, because I think there were people in certain quarters who were suggesting that Ed Davey might in some way be a liability or somebody who would want to keep under wraps because of whatever issues. But in fact, Ed Davey he's played a blinder, but he's not somebody who's gaming things and playing. He's actually deadly serious, despite the tactics that have been employed that have involved humor and engagement. I think Ed's personal story around the care for his mother, the care for his young son, and other challenges he faces within his family have really captured imagination and won plaudits across the political spectrum and across the third estate, from newspapers that would not normally give house room to the Liberal Democrats. And I think that's been a bit of a surprise. It's not particularly surprised me because I know Ed and I rate him immensely. And if ever I message him about any issue, he will get back. He's never too important, never too busy at some point in that day to be back in touch on an issue, whether it's a personal matter or matter of policy. But I think Ed Davey has been the surprising revelation of this campaign.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that. I'm sure it's Ed involved, but the team behind your messaging have had a cracking campaign. And I personally thought the launch and the focus and the personal touches around social care, which often doesn't get much of a look in politics, was really well done. So congratulations and more power to you on that. When you are out knocking the doors or at the hustings, are there any of your party's policies which are causing you any kind of difficulty? You know, I won't bring it up, but are tuition fees still looming large?
Tuition fees occasionally mentioned. I also saw them at another hustings outside my constituency where they were brought up in a very pointed way very recently. They have been thrown up occasionally.
You're in Monmouthshire. We mentioned TC Davis. One of our other bite-sized pod guests is the Labour challenger Catherine Fuchs. You know, how do you see the challenges you're up against in the constituency? Who's your main challenger, do you think?
Well, I mean, Catherine Fuchs is presenting a strong challenge. She's got a very well-resourced campaign, and it wasn't lost on anyone that Keir Starmer and the whole glitterati of the Welsh Labour and indeed the UK Labour lineup was in the Priory Centre in Abergavenny a few weeks ago for the launch at a Welsh level of the campaign. So clearly, Labour are targeting that seat with an appetite, and so I think it's fair to say that apart from the incumbent, clearly Catherine Fuchs is a formidable opponent in that regard. What I have been emphasising on the doorstep in my literature and also in hustings is the fact that we need a strong Liberal voice for the communities of Monmouthshire at a time when the Conservatives have kind of seemingly run out of road and are desperately in need of rest and recuperation, both sort of moral and in policy terms. But at a time when the leader of the opposition and the highly likely to be Prime Minister uses the term liberal as a term of abuse to batter the Prime Minister, accusing him of liberal policies on immigration. So if the would-be Prime Minister is using liberal pejoratively, and the wheels have entirely come off the cart of the Conservatives, I think the need to reassert that strong liberal voice and those liberal values that have been so core to Welsh politics over time is really urgent.
We're less than a week away now. We're actually recording a week before the results are announced. You know, what do you think the kind of mood music is like across both Wales and the wider UK for this election? Do you think it's a positive election, or do you think there's you know, is it relatively negative and you know, hostile?
Well, I think there is a strong level of skepticism bordering on cynicism with a large chunk of the electorate. I don't think that the real optimism and spring in the step of people is perhaps what it was at a previous landmark election that we recall in the 1996-97 period. You know, politics has lost a lot of respect, public life, the deference that once was shown to leaders on various parties is not what it was. However, as I said before, I think there are some really encouraging signs, and I look to the constituency which I'm contesting, Monmouthshire. I see real readiness to listen, to embrace, to engage. I know candidates might find being bombarded with hundreds of emails on 20, 30, 40 topics, some of them fairly obscure, others mainstream. But the fact that people take the trouble to do that, and I've responded as best I can to 70, 80% of them, and those that haven't got sort of buried or lost or auto-deleted, I try to engage. And when people then come back to you with further feedback and you have little mini conversations with people that you wouldn't otherwise meet, I've got to say I find that positive and encouraging, and I've had some really rewarding exchanges in that connection. I do also see that this time next week, when the election results are emerging, despite the likelihood of a stonking majority for the Labour Party, there is the prospect and a chance of some diversity of voices, and I see that particularly in terms of the really strong prospect of the Liberal Democrats, if not being the official opposition party, certainly of being established clearly as the strongest third party in British politics. I think that is really important, and that's something that I would emphasize. And I'm looking also particularly to outside my own immediate party, but our sister party in Northern Ireland, the Alliance Party. We've got the possibility of making a breakthrough and consolidating our presence in the Northern Ireland contingent to Westminster, which I think could be really exciting. Saoirse Eastwood and Naomi Long, alongside the established presence that we have there in Westminster, is very, very encouraging.
Well, that's good. You have kind of stolen my final question here about what do you expect post the election. So we are expecting, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a Labour majority, Conservatives vastly reduced, and Lib Dems cemented as at least that third party in the UK.
I'm not going to challenge that set of assumptions. They seem to be pretty well based on the prime quality of polling, and a great fan of John Curtis, particularly since Professor John Curtis, learnt his trade at the desk of the late great Sir David Butler, who I had the privilege to meet in the last several years when he came to visit the Black Mountains, and his son lives in Rhyadr, as you may know, and he was one of the ultimate pundit. And I think Sir John Curtis has expressed a view similar to what you've just expressed, and it's becoming mainstream. But I think the great thing is that virtual certainty of a strong Labour performance makes it absolutely vital that people feel freed up from the tipsters and the betting and the polling and counter-polling and the gaming of the results, and actually feel able in selective areas to vote with their heart for the values that matter to them, their liberal values, green liberal values, green values, whatever is the appropriate vehicle. And I am really optimistic that alongside the main headline, we can actually achieve something that could be groundbreaking. And I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I do want to thank you for your time this morning. As an ex-Gwynedd old boy myself, and you were a few years older than me, but I do remember you on occasion. I do really want to wish you well in your campaign. I'm on the green side of things, but for an ex-school colleague, I think, I do really wish you well. And, if listeners want to hear a little bit more about you and your campaign, can they find you on social media? Or have you got a platform you prefer them to use?
Principally on X, formerly known as Twitter, at William Powell 21.
Okay. Well, we'll put that in the show notes, and we'll also put the full list of candidates standing in the constituency so everyone can see who's there. But Bill, thanks once again, and best of luck for the next week.
Thank you, Kerry. It's been a real privilege. Cheers. Diolch.
Thank you for listening to Hiraeth. If you like what you heard, please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.